Do you wanna be a tree? Come on, let's go and heal. I know you really want to be a big old tree. That's how you really feel. Oh. Hello, Sylvanus. Thought you'd be...
Burn it.
Burn it.
Oh, no, Sylvanus! No! No!
Burn it!
Guess I didn't know the talent, gear, rotation, legendaries, and more. But you don't have to make the same mistake. So watch this video and learn all of those things about Resto Druid, because Resto Druid is pretty fun. And speaking of fun, you know what? It's not fun telling you that you have to like and subscribe and enable those notifications again and again and again and in every video, because this is the world we've come to. A world where trees burn and people don't subscribe to channels that they like. Hey, this is only assuming you like our stuff, because, you know, we do other things besides spec guides. We have, what are those called? Podcasts. And also we do tier lists, and we know y'all love tier lists. But no, really, guys, all jokes aside, it really does help the channel out. It helps the video grow and get to more people, and it does give you all of our content in your inbox as soon as it gets published, because otherwise YouTube is like, nah. But you probably already know all of that, so let's kick it with the talent, and we're gonna start with Abundance. Based on the tooltip, this will perform the best in raid scenarios. The more targets are present for your rejuvenation, the better the buff to regrowth will be. It's not like you cannot use this in dungeons and be efficient, but having efficient rejuvenations out, and a few of them, is more likely to happen in raids, since parties in dungeons can only have 5 out, lowering the ceiling to its potential. And we are talking about efficient healing here. Alternatively, you can opt for Scenario and Ward in dungeons. This works better in dungeons, but the purpose of this is to increase single target throughput. Tanks usually take more damage in Mythic Plus, and if everything plays right, you will most often than not have to heal the tanks over DPS, and an increase in single target throughput puts you at Scenario Ward. The second row is all about survivability. Well, it would have been a mobility row if not for renewal. This option is weird for it to be here. It has its uses, probably more in very high keys when there's a lot of unexpected damage coming in your face. Think of 4+ stacks of Bolster Ranger mobs in Theater of Pain or Halls of Atonement, just shooting your face. Mobs and mechanics that do not target tanks and can hit you or hit your DPS, they usually hit pretty hard in tough enough content. Usually that's when you want renewal, or if you fuck up or go into an encounter blind without knowing when shit will start to hurt, and that's usually progression type of content. Outside of that, Wild Charge will probably be your most used option here. It gives you a different form of charge depending on the shapeshift form you will be in. In caster form, it lets you jump to an ally, helps with staying in range if they keep moving around to dodge mechanics, and so forth. In open spaces, the travel form leap will also be useful and may give you the most flexibility to traverse terrain, since you don't need a target for it. Lastly, for specific raid scenarios, Tiger Dash can save you from mechanics that want you to move now and right now. This will replace your normal 2-minute cooldown dash with a 45-second Mega Dash that will give you a massive burst of speed, which decays over time. The third row is the Affinity row. Now, I will start off by saying, pick what you think you will need the most. It's probably going to be between Guardian Affinity and Balance Affinity. Realistically, you want Balance Affinity in all scenarios. It outputs the most amount of damage, and Typhoon is just a purely superior utility spell. Not to mention, if you will be playing Night Fae, which you should, you can Convoke in Boomkin form for the most amount of damage. If you want to use Convoke for that damage, at least. Outside of that, you still get the 5 extra yards on your heals, which really only comes in handy in raids. Guardian Affinity can be useful if you feel you are taking massive amounts of damage, which can be an issue when progressing through the tier, or maybe you are just not interested in doing any damage, in which case Guardian is the way to go. Feral is for DPS and move speed, but DPS is better with Boomy at the moment, so For the fourth row, you have 2 main options. For utility purposes, Mass Entanglement helps in scenarios where your tank has to kite more than one mob. This is very situational, because the only real time you want to root is for adds like the first boss in Plaguefall or the second in Mist of Tyrann's Scythe, and your normal route is enough for that. Second, pools that require tanks to kite are often pools with maybe 1 or 2 mobs that cannot be rooted, so the usefulness of a mass route can decrease. All of this in dungeons, since in raids outside of Sunking, you probably won't use roots at all. The more all-around option is Heart of the Wild, for the same reason you take Boomy Affinity. Although the cooldown is stupid long, using it with Convoke will give you 30% more damage on the balanced spells. Also makes Star Surge instant. Not everyone likes to do DPS on a healer, and for those scenarios you can opt out of these talents. Chances are that if you push content hard enough, there will either be downtime where there's nothing to heal because people know what they're doing. Not in Bugcraft, they don't. Focus. Or the damage requirement to end the encounter is so high that adding a few thousand DPS points from you really will make a difference, both raiding and mythic dungeons. It's the way of the game nowadays. For the level 40 talent row, 2 options once again. For raiding, Incarnation Tree of Life is the way to go. This can essentially be paired with intense raid damage phases where you ideally use the cooldown to spread HOTS out, mostly rejuvenations, and heal the raid like your life depended on it. Like Sylvanas is coming for your butt! As with all healer cooldowns, the purpose is to actually get value out of it and not overheal or pop at the wrong time. Or both. For dungeons and a bit more individual burst heal, Soul of the Forest will change your life. What this does is that after you use Swift Mend, you make your next regrowth, rejuvenation, or wild growth way more potent, like way more. How more? Way more. With that app description out of the way, a good combo to full heal a tank 99% of the time is to first have the HOTS on him or her, pop a Swift Mend, use Nature Swiftness, and follow it up with an instant regrowth for a stupid amount of healing. Obviously this is an oh shit combo, but outside of Nature Swiftness you can use this talent in a lot of ways based on what the group needs, which gives it flexibility. Wild Growth for AoE healing, Rejuvenation for a strong HOT to counter heavy incoming damage, and Regrowth to essentially save your target. 45 row Spring Blossoms as always. Although the playstyles don't see mastery stacking as much after the nerf, an extra HOT still gives enough bang for your buck when you want efficient HOTs and big regrowths. Not to mention that when people are actually stacked and stay in the fucking efflorescence, the heal is pretty good overall in terms of throughput over mana cost. And last but not least, this row hasn't really changed in the way that it functions and what it aims to achieve. Flourish will be your default raid option. It works towards intense AoE healing phases where you will aim at putting as many HOTs on as many people out as possible, pop a Wild Growth, maybe put 1 or 2 more Rejuves out, pop Flourish, and boom! HOTs galore! You can even follow this up with Tranquility for some ENR level healing. And since you ideally take Abundance on the first row, you can spam Rejuves prior to your Wild Growth into Flourish combo and then cast basically free regrowths on everybody. Can you feel the synergy? This can also work in dungeons, in keys where Pride healing is a problem. You can have Flourish for every Pride if you time it properly and can help your group survive for those last stacks of AoE party damage. Alternatively, strictly useful in dungeons, Photosynthesis still remains solid. With the versatility of its usage, will help your tank survive heavier damage intakes or free up time healing the tank so you can DPS. You can swap the Life Bloom on you when your party is in need of healing for more overall AoE throughput as well. Versatility. Although certain talents are classified into raiding and dungeons, they are mostly playstyle defining options. You can explore running Tree and Flourish in dungeons and Scenario Board in raids and so on. What's important is to get comfortable with the spec and understand what your toolkit will excel at. Gearing healers is not as straightforward as it is for DPSers. Although there are ways to sim, it's not the same. You can use tools such as Questionably Epic with their live tool to compare items and such. It has been worked on by the big resto brains out there to give you the best information when it comes to stats and gear and what has the most throughput. Outside of that, you will just need to understand what the stats do, how they affect your gameplay, and you will be able to make your own choices. As a reference, intellect will always be on top no matter what. After the level and stat squish of Shadowlands, and really similarly to any other expansion, eye level is the best metric at the start for raw throughput. Outside trinkets, rings and necks, eye level will win out against pure secondary stats, which differ a bit based on the content that you do. In raids, you want haste above all stats, with mastery, crit and verse equal on the last spot when it comes to a point-by-point comparison. Haste makes your heals over time tick faster, meaning more healing. Makes your casts quicker as well, be it your heals or your moonkin damage abilities. Mastery, harmony has been nerfed a bit but still functions the same. Every hot on the target increases the healing of every other spell you do by a percentage. And with each heal over time effect present, the bonus stacks. Note, the bonus is only activated by Restoration Druid spells, so no HOTS from external sources like gear, trinkets, conduits, and such. Crit and versatility are fairly straightforward, with the special note that they also contribute to your overall DPS if ever that was an objective. Mastery actually is the only stat that does not offer you any kind of DPS gains. As for stats in dungeons, this is where the versatility of Druid comes into play. Keeping Mastery and Haste close to each other in strength when it comes to one-on-one stat point comparison and not the actual percentage, since they work differently, just the raw stat amount. They both help with overall healing, while versatility and crit follow after. Versatility, on the other hand, offers defensive strength, which is hard to quantify when you think of your throughput. But then we come to the argument of you being tankier, it reduces the need to heal yourself, so that's very good. And this can be further debated with Leech as a stat. Both in raids and dungeons, this is one of, if not the best healer stat from a mathematical standpoint. This transforms your healing and damage dealing into personal sustain. This further ensures that you will passively have an increase in survivability, and things can be even more intricate, which we will leave for sources like the Dreamgrove community, with a lot of advanced resources at their disposal to help you should you wish to further your advancement in the spec. For the actual consumables, start by using a Celestial Guidance enchant for the weapon. This procs with an intellect buff, not very big, but the proc is very often giving you a decent uptime on the buff. For the chest, opt for Eternal Stats with an added Heavy Desolate Armor kit for the extra durability. Eternal Intellect for the bracers will be your best choice there, with a Fortified Leech enchant for the cloak to close off the tankiness argument. And because Intellect is so good for you, a Leviathan's Eye of Intellect gem will work the best for your first socket. Yes, it's a BFA gem. Intellect is good, okay? And obviously fill the rest with quick jewel clusters, although you don't need to feel forced to go for the BFA gem, since the haste ones are very close in terms of overall value. For your rings, 10 out of haste will do just nicely, and you can always replace these with the stat of your choosing. There are a few potions you can equip yourself with for different situations. The Potion of Spectral Intellect will be your general power booster, both in terms of damage but also healing throughput. Pair this up with the phase in which you want to output more numbers or need to output more numbers. Potion of Spiritual Clarity and Spiritual Mana potions are there to indeed help you with mana issues. The flask will obviously be the Spectral Flask of Power, and you can also opt for weapon oils if you want to min-max. The first thing that will come to mind is the Embalmer's Oil for some self-sustain. The healing is actually pretty tiny, and other times you can easily sacrifice it for more damage output if you are comfortable with Owl Weaving. Use Shadowcore Oil then. To nobody's surprise, the Feast will be your ideal food buff. But we all know it's not that accessible, so a replacement with the Tenebrous Crown Roast aspect or any other secondary food buff of your choice will do just nicely. There is one covenant for druids and one covenant only. Convoke! Wait, no. Night Fae! It offers you the most versatility, ones from Dreamweaver and Nia Soulbinds that give you Convoke, a large stat buff when you activate a class ability from Night Fae. With Dreamweaver, you will get Field of Blossoms, a fat haste increase, and you can build a Soulbind by taking Empowered Chrysalis and whatever you wish on the second to last row. You want to take Dreamweaver primarily in raids, but it does work really well in dungeons also. The other soulbinds will be Nia with her Grove Invigoration. Her you want to build on the 2 potency route for raiding, since her poison trait won't be activated anyway. You cannot interrupt your healer. But simply for the mastery buff and the 2 potency slot, it can be worth it in raid. Nia's Tools Herbs is actually really good in Mythic Plus scenarios where the extra healing will help. And like I mentioned, you get either haste or mastery from them when you press Convoke. Wait, no, I got it right this time. And yes, Convoke the Spirits is the funnest druid ability in the game so far. It's crazy stupid RNG done right. Depending on the form you are in when casting it, it will prioritize spells from that form. It will also take into account your distance from the target, and if it's an enemy, you will see more thrashes than ideally Star Surges if you are close. Because yes, you will want to use Convoke for DPS when in Moonkin form above all else. And that's for fun, but the healing from Convoke when popped in caster form is nuts and should not be overlooked. As for the actual conduits, Unstoppable Growth and Conflux of Elements will be your 2 best potency options in that order, should you aim for a double potency soulbind build. For endurance, Well-Honed Instincts is probably one of the best endurance conduits in the game, period. The frenzied regeneration it procs can save your butt so many times. Other than that, Innate Resolve can fill in the second endurance slot for more sustain and survivability. One of the best finesse conduits is Front of the Pack, which makes Roar so much better. And if you ever need a second, Born Anew is actually a good buff for anyone that happens to die and be resurrected by you. Trinkets have always been a special case. Checking the questionably epic live tool will give you the best info on what trinket has the most throughput if you have a few you want to decide among to figure out which works best. Kabbalist Hymnal and Soul-Letting Ruby are 2 of the best, if not BIS, for Resto overall. Although they offer Critical Strike, which is not bad mind you, they offer a lot of it. Unbound Changeling is a universal good trinket. The proc is RNG, but consistent, and most of all can change the stat based on what you last ate in terms of food buffs. If you PvP, you can opt for Sinful Gladiator's Insignia of Alacrity, good haste buff and intellect proc, or loot the Tuft of Smoldering Plumage from Sunking for a more different approach at trinket usage, ideally saving a group member. In terms of legendaries, Resto has quite a few that are good. Vision of Unending Growth will be your large group option, obviously raids more than anything, by allowing you to spread rejuvenations out, albeit with a small percentage. Might look small, but it is calculated at each instance of a rejuvenation heal tick, so the more you have out, the bigger the chance it will proc, and it will all work with abundance. Verdant Infusion works better in dungeons and makes your Swiftment into a beast of a spell. Not only does it not consume a hot to do its amazing healing, but it also extends all of them by 8 seconds, 10 seconds after the buff. Timing it right, you can even extend the scenario word twice once the hot portion has procced. Mother Tree is a bit more universal, works for raiding still, but has more value in smaller groups. It depends on what kind of healing you want to do. To get full value out of this one, you want to cast as many wild growths as possible. And lastly, once you are comfortable enough on the spec to do some damage and you don't need the extra throughput from your legendaries, Circle of Life and Death will be your 4th choice, mostly in Mythic Plus scenarios, since raiding will not benefit from this that much. When healing your tank or a member taking heavy damage due to a dot or a soak mechanic, make sure your life bloom is on them at all times and refresh it once it has less than 5 seconds remaining to get the pandemic window bonus. Keep rejuvenation up always and use Scenario Ward on cooldown if the target will keep taking damage. When big damage hits, regrowth is the best answer, or Swiftment if casting takes too long. If you took Soul of the Forest, Swiftment followed by regrowth is also very good for burst healing, especially with the Verdant Infusion legendary that will not consume a hot, making the end regrowth even stronger due to the extra stacks of mastery on top of the Soul of the Forest buff. If the damage is still too high, To keep your target up, pop an iron bark on them while continuing the healing. Lastly, still important, efflorescence should be kept under the melee group together with the tank. That way, on top of the good healing it does, the Spring Blossoms will add another stack of your mastery on top of all the HOTS you will be doing. When healing your raid group as a whole or your party in a dungeon, keeping efflorescence up is at the top of your list in terms of priority. Use Wild Growth on cooldown so long as there's more than one target hurt. Cast it after the damage hits, since the heal over time starts very strong and just decays over its duration, meaning you want to have the strong ticks actually heal. Cast Rejuvenations on targets that need healing or are about to be hit by something and will need healing soon. Usually you want to use Rejuvenation for an upcoming ramp scenario or a cooldown window generally, which we will go over in a bit. Use Regrowth and Swiftman like mentioned earlier to heal heavily damaged allies and prevent them from doing 0 DPS. Because, let's be honest, that's who you will be healing most of the time. Outside of personal defensives, which should be pretty straightforward on how to use, let's look at some of the more nuanced playstyles. First, the old reliable Tranquility. When you pop it, it heals all members of your party or raid and gradually applies a very tiny HOT on them that stacks, and triggers your mastery of course. For the most optimal usage of Tranquility, you want to pop a Wild Growth just before Tranquility. And with this argument, all other HOTs apply, as in, the more HOTs you have up before popping Tranquility, the more impactful the cooldown will be. Working into this is also Flourish. You can pretty much approach this similar, put as many rejuvenations up on your group as your primary ramp spell, like mentioned earlier, life blooms, scenario words and all of that jazz, pop a Wild Growth and then Flourish, or let the Wild Growth tick a little by putting a few more rejuves out, then Flourish to get the most out of extending Wild Growth. Follow this with a Tranquility if needed and you will vomit HPS numbers on your group. Beautiful. You can even optimize high octane healing phases by using Innervate for mana conservation. When you want to have an efficient Innervate window or Innervate bomb, how it's called, or should be called, because Innervate is the bomb. Get it? You pop Innervate and make sure to put Efflorescence down first for maximum mana efficiency. Continue by popping 5 to 8 rejuvenations on the raid and finish with a Wild Growth, and even a Flourish, for a massive AoE healing phase at no mana cost. The idea here is to preemptively start with this a few seconds before the group takes damage, so that Wild Growth hits just after your allies have lost their HP. Shout out to the Dreamgrove Discord community for all the druids out there, but specifically for the Resto brains that have theory crafted, tested, and compiled the data that we as Resto druids use to become better healers. Of course, you can find online guides written on Icy Veins and Wowhead that can go further deep into the spec, but more than anything, Questionably Epic is an amazing website for all healer specs that give you a lot of in-depth that we usually don't put in our videos, so we don't turn them into podcasts because those are different series that we also have on our channel. All the awesome information has helped us understand Resto Druid better and can help you as well, and we would like to give a special thank you to Volk, one of the top biggest Resto brains out there that helped feedback and correct some of our misunderstandings about the spec so that you can get the information properly. And of course, as always, a big thank you to our patrons for supporting the stream and making all of this possible. You guys are freaking amazing. We cannot say this enough, and we are really grateful for all of the support. And if you, dear viewer, like our content and want to support us a little bit more, check the link down below to our Patreon page. Patreon page is what I wanted to say. I'm a professional. And you might find some other things that are worth your while. All of the links to everything that we said is down below. Links are down below. They're plural. They're more than one. Thank you for watching the video. Take care. See you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.